Welcome, friends, family, fans, to the Pro-Child Politics book launch event leading up to the presidential debate. I'm Katie Faust, founder and president of Them Before Us. Our new book, Pro-Child Politics, is a project of Them Before Us. What we work to do at Them Before Us is center the child in all conversations about marriage and family. In essence, we seek to put them, the children, before us, the adults. That works very well when we're talking about things like marriage, divorce, reproductive technologies, modern families, and even adoption. What does it look like to put kids first? And we have long theorized that this lens of prioritizing children above adult desires could and should be applied to all matters of politics. So that's what we did in our most recent project, Pro-Child Politics. The book is coming out in 2 weeks. Now, I am not qualified to write this book on my own. So what we did is we conscripted 19 subject matter experts to take every evergreen political issue and look at it through the lens of child protection. I have two of those contributors with me today. One is Billboard Chris Elston, who wrote our chapter on gender ideology. And we also have Tiffany Justice, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, who wrote our chapter on education. So we wanted to have you all together to hear from these two contributors to get a taste and a flavor of what it means to put kids first in these two critical issues that are going to be a part of our election, our culture, our conversations for years to come. And I'm also joined by Josh Wood, Executive Director of Them Before Us. And he authored the conclusion of Pro-Child Politics and helps us to understand what is it that we're supposed to do now that we have 19 chapters, 3,000 words on these evergreen political topics. What are we supposed to do to put it in action? So we're so glad that you're with us. And I am just going to kick things off by saying, Billboard Chris, thanks for joining us. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you wrote in your chapter of Pro-Child Politics? Maybe one or two of the points that you think are the most important, especially as people start thinking through the questions, some of the conversations they're about to hear in the debate, and what they're going to be considering at the ballot box.
Sure, it's really all about debunking this myth that there's such a thing as a transgender child. There is, of course, no other class of human apart from girls and boys. This label does not belong to anyone, particularly children. We shouldn't be telling them that they were supposed to be something they're not. The message of gender ideology is one of self-hatred. It's extraordinarily negative. It's telling the most struggling, vulnerable children in our society that the only way they're going to find true happiness is by changing their body. So that's totally insane. We need to stop this child abuse, and that's what it is. It's child abuse, this business of giving kids puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. And to do that, we need to undo a lot of the confusion in society. So hopefully that chapter helps give people some of the basics and snaps them out of this trance that a lot of people are under, because they've been confused for decades by this false notion that the left is trying to help kids be who they really are, that preys on people's natural empathy. So we just need to educate them so they understand what we're dealing with.
Yeah, awesome. And we gave you a very hard task, both you and Tiffany and the other authors, to take your topic and boil it down to 3,000 words. I mean, your chapter on gender ideology, Tiffany's chapter on the state of American education should have been a book in and of itself. But we made you give us the bare bones basics, distill it down to the raw, hard facts. And, thankfully, people are going to be able to grab this and, within 30 minutes, have a pretty good understanding of these topics. Also, we have a Q&A function at the bottom. If you have questions for Chris or Tiffany or Josh or me, please drop them in there and we are going to try to get to some of your questions. But before we do, Tiffany, thanks for joining us. Thank you for authoring this chapter on education. Absolutely a hot topic between these two candidates in this election. Give us some of the things that you shared, some of the highlights of what you put in your chapter on education, if we were to look at education from the perspective of putting kids first.
So I don't think there's anyone that can put kids first in education like a mom or a dad. And so I was so honored that you asked me to write this chapter, because I think there are probably a lot of people that would say, oh, well, she's not an expert in education, right? But the truth of the matter is that parents are the best and first teachers of their children. And a true education for a child, even if a child's going to school, means that the parent is fully engaged as a partner in that work. in raising their child, right? I mean, the parents raise the kids, the school helps to educate, and that's a partnership. Parental involvement is the #1 driver of student success, without a doubt. And we should strive to have every parent involved. And I know it's hard. I've worked in the school system. I've been a school board member. I know that not every parent can make every meeting or, is as engaged as we might like them to be. But that just means that we should be working even harder at engaging parents. But what we've seen the American education system do and the federal government do is really try to push parents out. And I think that's kind of where, Chris and I were so honored to be your guests tonight. We personally think our chapters are probably 2 of the most important chapters in the book when it comes to kids, because it's 2 of the things that are hurting children the most. And so I just tried my best to, put as much information in there to give people a baseline understanding of how we've gotten so far away from parents being as involved as they should in their kids' education. And the #1 takeaway is, parents, the onus is on you. You have a responsibility to raise your children and to make good decisions for them. And the more informed you are about issues, the better decisions you can make. And that's why Moms for Liberty. And thank you for letting me write the chapter.
Yeah, well, I love it. And what we did is we created a bit of a rubric that all the different authors had to follow, so that it wasn't just a smattering collection of essays. So it really was a cohesive work. And what you guys all had to do was begin with the real life story of a child that was harmed because we believed the lies about education, or we believed the lies about gender ideology. And then you guys outlined the major lies of gender ideology and education. And then you connected the dots. You said, here's how those lies harm kids. And then you said, here's the truth. Here's the truth about gender. Here's the truth about education. Here is how those truths would protect children if we acted on them. And Tiffany, one of your lies that had an accompanying truth that really rang like sound for me and the moms that are in my world in Seattle, who have a variety of kids going to a variety of different schools, especially through the pandemic. What we heard is the teachers are the expert. The doctors are the expert. The school is the expert. You parents, you are not the expert. You do not know best. And what you said in your book, which is so true, is that is a lie. Parents are the expert. Maybe not the expert in every child, but you are the expert in your child. And schools are doing a great deal to cut parents out of the education process. So I appreciate it because, what this book does is it serves as a bit of a primer on a variety of different political topics, from, beyond education and gender to energy, the environment, national security, immigration, all of the big hot topics, religious liberty, pornography, masculinity, femininity, policing. I mean, everything that we debate every election cycle is in here. And these chapters serve as a bit of a primer. If you feel like you don't know a whole lot about the economy or taxes or debt, we've got 3,000 words to help explain it to you. And so what both of you have done is taken these unwieldy, complex topics, education and gender, and you've said, here it is in a tight space in a way everybody can understand, and with extensive footnotes. So I want to know from both of you guys, we are about to go into what might be the only presidential debate between the 2 current candidates. I want to know, what are you listening for? What is it that you are hoping to hear from one or both of the candidates? If they were to get things right on your topic, what is it that you would hear in the debate coming up?
Ladies first.
No, you go. I mean,
okay.
Chris and I have been so honored to work together. We've worked so beautifully together. So you go first, Chris, because our issues are so intertwined.
All right. Well, we already know what Kamala Harris is going to say. And a video just went viral in the last 24 hours because Aaron Burnett on CNN read this policy that Kamala Harris felt that there should be taxpayer-funded gender surgeries for detained migrants. And even Aaron Burnett on CNN said, what? We know what the Democrats' policies are. Total and utter insanity and no parental rights to stop any of this. In the Democrat states like California and Minnesota and in Maine, they're passing laws so that kids can run away from home from their state of Texas or Florida or wherever to get puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, surgeries, and they won't return the child home. They will ignore subpoenas, court orders, and custody agreements so that these children can get transitioned. They will even hide these kids now from their parents if the child goes to school and says, my parents don't want to let me transition. I feel like I'm getting abused. They'll put them into a group home and they won't even tell the parents where their kid is. So it's total and utter insanity. What I would like to hear from President Trump is what he's already stated in several speeches, which is that on day one, he's going to issue an executive order pulling funding from any institution, pushing gender ideology on our kids. He's going to work with Congress to pass a bill stopping this federally and criminalizing the doctors who participate in it. And he just needs to do whatever he can with the power of that executive branch to put a stop to this, because we're all about parental rights. And the left try to use this argument against us. They say, if you're all about parental rights, why can't parents decide to consent for their children? Well, we are all about parental rights, but there's one right parents don't have, and that's the right to abuse their children. And this is child abuse. So I would like to hear that from President Trump.
Yeah, very good. And you're exactly right. I think that this is the intersection, the greatest intersection, one of many, between the education issue and the transgender issue. It is that both of them are steamrolling parental rights. But I also like your point, and personally, I know that I live in Washington State. I know people who have moved out of state, so their child will not be, in essence, kidnapped by the state and emancipated from them because of a disagreement about gender ideology. But I also like your point, Chris, that parental rights, especially the way that the left likes to portray them, is not a license to do whatever you want with your child. Children actually have a right. They have a right to innocence. They have a right to education that does not overtly sexualize them. And Tiffany, I know that you guys have done a lot of work on having age-appropriate materials in school libraries. And Chris, children have a right to have an intact, unmedicalized body. Parents don't have a right to poison them with puberty blockers. They don't have a right to mutilate them through gender affirming treatments and surgeries. So Tiffany, tell us what it is that you're hoping to hear related to education in the presidential debate.
Sure. First of all, I just want to say, Chris and I and our issues are interlinked because of the parental rights issue, but it is the schools that are seeding the ground now for all of the transgender ideology that is happening in our country. Yes, it's happening on social media, but you've got schools in places like Montgomery County, Maryland, where parents have been told by a judge that they cannot opt their child out of gender identity curriculum and sexual orientation curriculum in kindergarten. So, our issue is linked because it's this perpetuating cycle that has been established now, where they are feeding new kids into this cult, basically. I mean, Chris has been always really honest about what it is. Yeah, what do we want to hear from parents? I mean, parental rights protected. President Trump understands. I just spoke with him last Friday at the Moms for Liberty Joyful Warriors Summit. We had a great conversation and danced a little bit, which was fun, Katie. We did a little YMCA action. I don't know what to say, but man, that's a once in a lifetime experience. But I was able to talk to him about parental rights. And he, his answer was like, we're the party of common sense. Yeah. But this is craziness. Like the schools, he's like, sometimes I see these school boards, they're doing stuff. I don't even think they like the kids. He's not wrong. We're asking ourselves the same question. So he's a dad, he's a father. I'm hoping to hear he's going to support parental rights. I'm hoping that he's going to help us to do that in specific ways. He sometimes he says abolishing the Department of Education. I would say dismantling the Department of Education. I think that it's a process that we need to really take a hard look at. And so I would be hopeful that he'll continue to support, really just stopping the bureaucracy, that federal, and we talk about it in the book, that federal oversight that happened in the Department of Education really allowed for the union to have huge influence that they should never have been able to have. And they have pushed woke ideology and critical theory into all of our schools. And so hoping to hear that really from him and, just some common sense parenting stuff. I imagine that guns will come up and the shooting that just happened in Georgia. And, my answer, what I hope to hear from him on that issue specifically would be like, the kids are not okay. Like you guys keep trying to make it about the guns, but the fact that we've got 14-year-olds that want to go into schools and shoot schools, like the kids are not okay. And you guys closed schools for 2 years and you hurt our kids horribly. And you're not willing to accept the responsibility for that, right? That kid in Georgia was 14. So anyway, those are some of the things I'd like to hear the president talk about tonight. As far as Kamala Harris is concerned, she just put out most of Biden's policies from the start. We said at Moms for Liberty, the only reason that Kamala is more radical right now is the vice presidential candidate really showed who she is, but a lot of the policies are the same Biden policies that they're just regurgitating. She is inextricably linked to his failure. And I think that's what the American public need to remember.
Yeah, well, I think COVID was a major wake-up call for a lot of us, in a lot of different ways, certainly on the education front. And I think that what we saw very clearly is kids are not being put first. I mean, not COVID, but the COVID response, the COVID lockdown, the COVID shutdown of the schools, and the masking of even young children and the developmental delays and the lost academic success that they may never recover, especially some of the most vulnerable students. And so I talk about that in the introduction of pro-child politics, that like COVID was a very stark, tangible example of putting us before them, putting the adults before kids, and the very long-lasting harm that that is going to do to children. And you're right, they're not okay. We've got a couple questions in the chat. And one of them said, how can I begin to be a child advocate in my local area? And Josh wrote the conclusion of our pro-child politics book. And after, 19 chapters and an introduction, of this tome of how to think about all these political issues from the perspective of the child, he helped us with the, so what? What do we do now? How do we digest this? How do we implement it? Where do we go from here? So Josh, what would you say to that question? How can I begin to be a child advocate in my local area?
I think first off, you do have to be exposed to some degree to the things that are going on. And so make sure that you are getting good information to you. And I think that sometimes comes by following a variety of people, reading deeply, not just headlines. I know sometimes Twitter or X can be, a lot of outrage, but I think there's a need to dive deeply into the issues, specifically the ones you care about, and read across the spectrum to try to get the real story, what's going on and how kids in your community may be being harmed. I think, this whole idea can be a little overwhelming, especially when you read debt and immigration and ESG, and you've got all these amazing authors, Chris, Tiffany, that are experts. They've read on this, they've worked in this their whole lives. So I think sometimes it's kind of like that fair trade coffee movement back in the day, where it just felt like I couldn't go anywhere or do anything or spend any money without contributing to the evil empire. Sometimes we can get kind of analysis paralysis. And so a good first step for many of us may be look at across your life and just say, hey, what are some things that I can just stop doing? Does the place I work out, has it suddenly lost its belief in safe, sex segregated spaces? Well, I might not be at the point where I'm ready to picket the gym, but I could stop giving them my money. And that's a good way we call it getting to neutral. Can you just look across your life and say, are there some places I can just stop? I can just get to neutral. Well, then I think personally, examine of the issues we talk about, examine what may be just one issue that you're really passionate about. It might be education. Maybe going through COVID and seeing kids have to walk to Taco Bell to get Wi-Fi, maybe that radicalized you a little bit. And you're like, I'm going to run for school board. I think that's my mission. I can't become an expert on taxes. I'm never going to be able to advocate for a balanced budget in my state or district or county, but I can run for school board, or I can take the chair of the PTA. And I'm going to put money towards things that I think are best for kids. And I'm going to be a strong voice because I've raised all this money and I'm going to put the funds where I know it needs to go. There's things like that. You don't have to feel like you got to be the expert on 19 of them, but maybe just pick your battle, find the one area. And then the last one I would say is we got to grow the team. Like we know, and we've experienced the harms, right? We have to tell people about this. A lot of people walk along, they don't know the stats, they don't know the figures, they don't think about it the way that we do. We have to go and evangelize. We got to talk and share. How are kids being harmed by some of the lies that culture's pushing?
Well, and the nice thing is we have captured it all. We have got the fundamentals. We have identified the lies. We have spelled out the truth, and we've got it all for you in each chapter of this book.
Can I just say something to what Josh was talking about? I just want to say something because you said lifelong experts. I think Chris and I would both admit that we are not lifelong experts. We are a mom and a dad who saw something that was happening that we knew was wrong. And we were like, who's going to fix it? And then we looked around and we were like, oh, I guess maybe it's us. And then we've just worked so hard to do, just to create as much awareness as possible. But I just want anyone listening to know, like lifelong expert, I am not. I am just a mom who was really mad and thought, man, they're not putting kids first. We have got to do something about this.
I've got to touch on this too. I was a financial advisor. Okay. When I learned about gender ideology, I came across this term puberty blockers, I think in 2019. And I said, what are those? Look, this isn't complicated. They're stopping puberty in children. They're giving them the opposite sex's hormones. They're making girls look like boys, having them grow beards. These girls have to get hysterectomies after 4 or 5 years because of the damage caused. They're sending teenage girls into menopause. In 10 seconds, I just told you all you need to know. Why are we stopping the healthy development of children? Now you can build on that knowledge and you can learn all you want and gain all the statistics and everything you need. But to the moms and dads out there, you're the expert. No one knows your child like you. This 24-year-old teacher with blue hair who spent 20 hours with your kid the first week of school, who's now teaching them that they might have been born in the wrong body. What do they know?
Yeah.
They know nothing. They're kids themselves. Where were they when your child was sick when they were 3 years old and you were up all night? Where were they when you were running alongside them on their bike, teaching them how to ride the bike for the first time? Where were they all these countless memorable hours that we have building these bonds with our children? And now these people want to come along and drive a wedge between us and them?
Nope.
Forget about it. So the first thing you need to do is all in here.
Yeah.
It's resolve. You need to decide you're going to do something and not just be a dilettante about it. You've got to decide you're going to do something and then figure it out, because it all starts with that willpower.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm laughing because I was recording an interview earlier today with Eric Metaxas, and he's like, how did you get into, how did you do this? And I'm like about 10 years ago, I was just a pastor's wife and a stay-at-home mom. And he's like, how'd you get into this? And I'm like, rage. I was so pissed off that children were being put last, especially in matters of marriage and family. And I'm like, nobody is representing them. Nobody's standing up for them. No one's articulating their pain. They can't defend themselves. And that's what's going on in all these different areas of politics, whether you're talking about digital technology, pornography, even like matters of religious liberty, decisions about defunding the police, education, gender ideology, family, race. Kids can't actually defend themselves. They don't have the capacity to articulate how this is harming them. That is our job. It is the job of the adults. And so that is why we have taken all of these, what can seem like complex or difficult to understand issues, and we have conscripted experts. Maybe they're recent experts. Some of them are lifelong experts who have distilled all of these different topics down to the principles of how do we put kids first. We only have a few more minutes, but we got this interesting question from Blair. And he said, what putting kids first issues are Democrats better on than Republicans? Or what putting kids first issues are Republicans getting wrong that are the most disappointing to you? So I would love to hear your thoughts. I will tell you this, from my perspective, the Democrats very often, I want to say always, but I don't want to go that far, very often wrap their policies in language of putting kids first, child protection, this is for the kids. But the actual implications of their ideas and their policies in almost every case harm children, right? They do it in the name of helping children, but very, very often the direct result is children are harmed. We see that very clearly on things like immigration and, the unaccompanied minors that are taking place. You do this very often when it comes to things like debt. Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to subsidize this and that. But the reality is we're just shackling our children with more debt. We even have a chapter on ESG and DEI that talks about how there is a direct connection between the promotion of ESG through multi-corporate organizations, multi-billion-dollar corporations like Disney, who push ESG in the name of helping children. But when you actually implement it at a corporate level, at a state level, at a national level, you are talking about devastation for entire economies, families, and ultimately children. So in my opinion, the Democrats have it all exactly backwards. Nothing that they are doing, everything they are doing corporately, financially, fiscally, culturally, technologically, it always seems like kids are the losers. When it comes to Republicans, in principle, what they do is for kids. Their communication of it, the policies, I think, are ineffective a lot of the time. I would say the place where both parties have an abysmal fail is spending and debt. Both of them are shackling the next generation with debt that they never agreed to, and that the truth is they're never going to be able to pay back. And it is what Phil Kerpen said, he calls it fiscal child abuse, and that's really what it is. But I'd love to hear you, Chris and Tiffany, where do you feel like, Democrats are putting kids first where maybe Republicans aren't?
You want me to go first this time? Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think this is going to be like off Moms for Liberty brand and just my own personal Tiffany Justice opinion, but I'm going to give it. I think that ESG is environmental social governance scores. There's a scoring system that companies use to try to prove that they can like out virtue signal the other companies, even though it ends up being worse for the planet and kids.
Yeah.
So on the issue of women's health, and I think the Democrats have sadly brainwashed an entire generation of women to believe that it is somehow healthcare to kill your baby. And I think they do a much better job of talking about women's health. And I think that Republicans, if we want to, if we want to save more babies and we really truly believe in life, and then we need to do a much better job. And this is Tiffany Justice's personal opinion. But we need to do a much better job of, really helping moms with maternal health. The majority of women who have abortions because, I know this is off topic, but I'm just sharing. I think it's what they do well. They have abortions because they don't feel that they can handle the financial burden of having a baby, or they're scared about their health or the baby's health and being able to maintain a pregnancy. And so if we did a better job of helping moms who are pregnant, we would end up having better, healthier children. And then better, healthier children would mean better and more success in school and life. And so I just think it's something that Republicans could message a lot better about helping pregnant moms.
And I will say we do talk a little bit about that in chapter 1 of the book, authored by Abby Johnson, who talks a lot about the lies around reproduction, whether it's abortion or reproductive technologies. And then, Peachy Keenan gets into that in the femininity chapter, the lies that women believe and are told about their bodies, their reproductive systems, and how that works against mothers and kids. But Chris, what do you think? Where are Democrats getting it right, or Republicans need to do better?
Democrats get everything wrong. That party has been taken hostage by the radical left, the straight up communists who push their utopian, ridiculous ideologies into every aspect of society. Marxism, traditional communism focused on the disparities between the rich and the poor and had this utopian vision for equality or equity. That same ideology has expanded to every other aspect of life, where they deem that someone is oppressed based on their sexuality, based on their gender, based on their financial status, based on whatever. The whole ideology of the Democratic Party is that there are oppressors and there are oppressed, and we need to equalize it all, and they will destroy society in the process. What Republicans get wrong is they're too afraid to tell the truth about these cultural issues. Really? Kids are getting sterilized. 6,000 girls in the past 7 years, according to insurance data, have had their breasts cut off. Yeah. Up to 179 of those were 12 and a half years old and younger. And they don't want to speak up about it. Yeah. This is a winning issue. The Black community, the Hispanic community, all these communities that traditionally vote Democrat, they all hate gender ideology. But these establishment Republicans are afraid to talk about it. So they need to learn about it, and they need to start speaking boldly instead of letting the left take us far left and then taking back a few inches and then go further left and then take back a few inches. It's not good enough.
Dialectic, that's how it works.
That's right.
It doesn't go like this. It goes like back. James Lindsay had this interesting graphic that he used that showed the way that the dialectic works, and it moves you more left.
Wow.
So our society is drugged. Our food is terrible. Our kids are being treated the worst that they've ever been treated since we've existed on this continent, surely.
Yeah.
And so we need to get back to reality. We need to get back to nature and start putting these kids first. And where Republicans can fight back is against these pharmaceutical lobbyists, for example, who push all these drugs on our kids, including puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones.
Well, we got a debate to watch. I think Donald Trump's going to be brilliant tonight. I really do. I'm very excited about it, Katie. Thank you for having us. Yeah, I'm really glad you're able to join us. The nice thing about this work is you can look at all the different issues through the same lens, put kids first. And when you do, you get child protection and you get fantastic policy. So the book's going to be out in 2 weeks. Thank you so much, both Tiffany and Chris and Josh, for contributing chapters. And now let's go into this debate with an eagle eye towards who is protecting kids and who we can support in this presidential election. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Katie.